Uh, Great. Hi. Hi. Hey, fellas.
Hey man, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for making some time. My name is Josh Rothkopf. I'm happy to interview you guys about this film, which is extraordinary. So let's get right to it. Um, Mythic poetry, it's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because it can survive for centuries and centuries, but we all have different ideas of what it means as readers and when we hear it. So it means something different to every person. So I think as a first question to you guys, how do you enter into something that has such a like a mythological foundation and yet modernize it, make it personal for you? I would love to hear both of your answers to
Go on, Joel. Take it away.
that.
No stranger to myth. The the way to enter into a story like this is through the eyes of the director. Obviously, if he is passionate about the material and he's a very passionate man and a very smart man, has a real vision for what this project is. And it's up to us in conversation and in unison with David to really understand what's in his mind and how we can participate in that vision in order to help make it work, or at least our part of the machine work. What fascinated me about the story was the quest-like aspect, and that the characters that the rest of us, other than Dev, play along the way are there to challenge, to test, and to really sort of expose, I guess, his character, his integrity, and his worthiness of the challenge that he's accepted. For my part, to play this sort of very duplicitous, on one hand, welcoming force, and yet quite a dangerous one potentially at the same time. And yet, even though we know we're potentially playing, ghosts or reincarnations or ideas, that we're still tackling it with a certain amount of honesty. But this is a movie that allows you to kind of have a real twinkle in your eye, to really tune things up a little bit. So, the short answer is you put your faith and trust in a really, really well-intentioned director and be allowed to kind of gallivant and play,
Mm-hmm. I know that David Lowery has very clear vision, very distinct vision for his films. Dev, let me put that to you, because when I watch The Green Knight, especially those first 10 minutes, it feels like a very fresh, modern film. And it could be almost like an American Pie film in a way, where it's sort of a slacker, kind of a awakening in a whorehouse and rising to an occasion that he's not quite ready for. How did you enter into this material, and did David give you any particular cues as to how you might modernize your take on Gawain?
For me, in a way, that was really David's process. Mine was a process of real submission and trust in him as the visionary that he is. But you could see with the way he was approaching the sets and the costumes that kind of like was cranked ever so slightly differently. So there was a familiarity to the world, but also it kind of had a kind of slightly more modern composition to the way he was capturing this stuff and how we were able to move and talk. And there was a looseness to it that I was like, wow, this is awesome, particularly for me, in the way I was kind of talking, I was kind of throwing it away like I would in a very modern piece. I wasn't, putting as much weight on the words. And that's what I spoke to him about. I was like, how should we do this? How do I do it? And he's like, no, just kind of try and exist and bring as much truth to it as possible. And it's a testament to him. He's kind of managed to strike this balance. I think a lot of story tales around this era, they focus on the clashing of swords or whatever that is, but this is focusing on the more psychological journey aspects of the story. In a way, it's far more complex, and it really does more justice to the complexities of this poem and the kind of the questioning of fate and ambition and the chivalry code of the time. Particularly for me as a young actor, I could draw a lot of parallels of my journey in this industry and, being ambitious and trying to balance my life and ego and masculinity, all of that stuff. You know, I could see all the threads in there.
Yeah, and the idea of living honorably and the way that fate catches up, and the amount of time that you have may be finite, but how are you going to live within that time that you do have? I love David's reconfiguration of the tale, the way he creates this kind of almost like Last Temptation of Gawain section. Do you know what I mean? Where it's kind of like we see an alternate life that he may have had had he not been honorable in that moment. And I find myself wondering, just maybe as a straightforward question to both of you guys, does it help, like wearing armor or being on horseback or having a sword? Do these things help get into the moment and get into a character, and even get into the, like you were saying, Dev, getting into the psychology and the deeper thoughts about it?
Absolutely. I'm a great, trumpet blower of all the people that make us look good. It's hard to act in a vacuum because there would be no context without a set. And not just without a set and without costumes and makeup and hair and all, without excellent, practitioners in that way, because it allows us to just do our job. And we would be only a percentage of our final performance without them. And I do really believe it helps. I think one of the reasons I even became an actor, there's clues of it in my childhood, that I just loved playing dress-ups, and that dress-ups were a necessary kind of ingredient to activate the imagination. And I still believe that to this day.
Yeah. Dev, did it help?
Completely. I mean, the extents we went to, David, we have the entire crew trudging in wellies through streams and rivers, and we're making improvised pulley systems to get camera equipment up and just to get the shot. But it really, every frame's a painting in this film. You look at it and it's just like, there was never a moment where I was, I didn't either have a great scene partner and, Joel and all the rest of the team, or, you're just in this costume and it makes you sit differently, stand differently. A lot of this is about a young man romanticizing this knightly quest, and then all of a sudden very quickly realizing how brutal nature can be, and how humbling he gets humbled by it. His ego at the start of the film is totally bashed from him very quickly. And I felt that. I was trembling, on my horse. I was cold and wet and damp, and it was a physical process. And, David's films really explore time in a beautiful way. And as a performer, you rarely get to feel time, in scenes, because there's it's exposition and there's an editor's hands that really comes in. But in this, the way we shot this, David kind of sits and lets the scene really play out sometimes, really just puts you in a spot and is like, okay, now you try and get out of this situation. Your hands and legs are tied. And
well, that's a real director, right? He's letting you actually live in this mythical world. I'm being told I have to wrap, so I want to just thank you guys. You should be really proud of this film. It's just, there's so much to think about afterwards, and it really stayed with me, and just congratulations on it. It's beautiful work.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good luck with it.